Almost 3,000 years ago, a man we now know of as Isaiah was serving as a political advisor to the king of Israel. The nation of Israel at that time was beset by enemies on all sides, and the king that Isaiah served had agreed to a compromise offered by a neighboring nation that would keep the peace. Isaiah went to the temple in Jerusalem, very possibly to pray about this compromise. And there he received a vision, which Todd read for us today. In this vision, Isaiah is transported to the very throne of God. And he sees God, and God's robe flows down from the sky to fill the temple itself. Around God are flying angelic creatures who are calling out God's praises. Confronted with such a scene of majesty, Isaiah quickly feels his own inadequacy. But the angels themselves fly to him and, putting a coal to his lips, mark him as forgiven and made clean. Isaiah then hears God asking, "Who will go for us? Who will go to speak for the people?" And Isaiah responds, "Here I am, Lord. Send me." And Isaiah is given a prophetic message. But instead of a promise of salvation or a declaration of love or hope, instead, Isaiah is charged with bringing news of destruction and desolation. The people of Israel, he is told, have, in their search for peace and stability, made a compromise that will lead to their downfall. The compromise they made was underpinned by evil, and it could not be sustained. And Isaiah is told war will come upon Israel, and with it would come terror. The lectionary doesn't include this part of the prophecy. It's a little bit of a downer for a Sunday morning. But Isaiah's prophecy is that the houses will be without people, and the cities will lie wasted, and the people will be sent far away, and a great emptiness will come upon the land. With this commission that he receives in this vision, Isaiah was transformed from a high-ranking, respectable government official to someone who must speak about his nation's failing and predict their imminent doom. And this did not make him popular. He returned speaking against his homeland, predicting terrible things for his countrymen. These predictions we often associate with someone who is an alarmist, or even with someone who is showing a lack of patriotism. And sure enough, both the Talmud and the Orthodox Church teach that Isaiah's prophecies put him on the wrong side of the powers that be, and report that he died a martyr's death from a king who had heard one too many bad tidings from Isaiah. But Isaiah had seen a truth. He had been given a commission. And so he shared that truth, no matter how unpopular it made him with his peers, and regardless of the personal cost. 162 years ago, this Tuesday, Charles Sumner, a young man from a well-known Boston family and a member of this church, was serving in the United States Senate. The United States Senate at that time was considering yet another in a long series of compromises between those in our country who supported slavery and those who believed in freedom. At stake this day was whether Kansas, a territory in the middle of the country, should be made a state, which would almost certainly have meant that another slave-holding state was added to the Union. At that time, the Kansas Territory was racked by unimaginable violence between pro- and anti-slavery forces, in which we now call this period Bleeding Kansas. Southern senators had taken to the floor, and they had spoken in favor of Kansas as a pro-slavery state. And a response had to be made. Someone had to speak for the people and speak against slavery. And so the next day, Charles Sumner took to the Senate floor. The message he delivered on the 19th and the 20th of May, 1865, was one of destruction and damnation. He condemned the inordinate power of slaveholder interests in Congress, and he specifically castigated the senators who authored the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which opened the door to the expansion of slavery. These continual compromises the nation was making with pro-slavery interests, Sumner prophesied, were underpinned by evil, and they could not be sustained. The continuation of slavery would bring upon America death and destruction, laying waste to both our integrity and our safety. With this speech, Sumner was transformed from a respectable, Harvard-educated orator into controversy personified. And it did not make him popular with his peers. The next day, the Southern Congressman Preston Brooks, a cousin of Senator Butler, who Sumner had castigated in his speech, fell upon Sumner on the floor of the Senate, and he beat him with his gold-headed cane, while another representative kept others from intervening by brandishing a pistol. Congressman Brooks beat Sumner until his hardwood cane broke into two, at which point Sumner lay unconscious on the Senate floor. It would take him almost 3 years to recover enough from his injuries to return to the Senate, although the Massachusetts General Court ensured that he could by continually re-electing him in absentia. It was a high price that Sumner paid, but he saw a truth. He felt that he had been given a commission, and so he shared that truth, regardless of how unpopular it made him, and regardless of the high personal cost. We know, in the light of history, that both Isaiah and Charles Sumner's prophecies came true. Israel was invaded and overtaken, and her people were exiled into captivity far from their land. America became embattled in the Civil War, which is still our nation's deadliest conflict. A recent study puts the death toll at 850,000 people, which is just an unimaginable percent of the population of our country at that time. And it is a conflict that we perhaps have not yet fully healed from. It was was after that bloody war that Memorial Day, which we will mark tomorrow, was instituted, so that a hurting nation could mourn its losses and honor its dead. The flags that adorn the common across the street are a stark reminder of the soldiers that have answered the commission of their country, then as well as today. Isaiah and Sumner were both given difficult, terrible truths. Truths that made them unpopular, truths that made them seem unpatriotic, truths that tasked them again and again with pointing to the underbelly of things that people did not wish to see. They prophesied that evil done in the name of keeping peace and security would be their nation's downfall. And we now know through the lens of history that they were both right. These prophets, I think, remind us that truth is often hard. Truth, when we first hear it, can often sound alarmist, or it can even sound unpatriotic. It can often disrupt stability or even threaten our security. Truth, at first blush, can often seem like something we would rather avoid, an underbelly that we do not want to acknowledge, even sometimes like fighting words. And yet, it is these hard truths and the people who tell them that can often bring us back from the brink of destruction, keep us from continuing down a path of which we do not want to tread. And so today, as we leave this sanctuary and we go back to a divided and a divisive world, may we listen for the prophets among us. May we listen for those who are telling truths that are unpopular, those who are pointing to the underbellies in our own nation or even in our own lives, who are pointing even to those things that we do not want to see. And may we keep our ears open to the truths that we might be being commissioned to tell, even if the cost is high and the message is sometimes an unpleasant one. For there are prophets among us still, and God is speaking still, even to our own hearts. This, I believe, is our commission, given to us from the prophets who came before us, some of whom, like Charles Sumner, sat in these very pews. Our commission is that we listen to those voices today who are calling out injustices, no matter how much we would like to turn a blind eye, no matter how terrible or overwhelming we find the truth, or how distasteful or even unpatriotic we might find the messenger. For we never know if the truth they are speaking might be the message that could save us, or even when the messenger might be a prophet. May God guide us as we take up this work. And now, let us, in undying hope, rise together and sing America the Beautiful.